The briefing room at Camp Thunder, deep in the Brunei rainforest, was thick with testosterone and unspoken rivalry. Two elite units, separated by an ocean and bound by a common language, stood on opposite sides of a challenge that would become legend. Lieutenant Commander Jake Hawk Morrison led the Navy SEAL team, 6 operators who'd cut their teeth in the Hindu Kush and the deserts of Iraq. Across from them, Captain James Thornton commanded the SAS contingent, 4 seasoned veterans of Sierra Leone, Afghanistan, and covert operations that would never see daylight. 7 days, announced Colonel Richards, the Joint Exercise Coordinator. Same jungle, same objective. Extraction point is 30 kilometers north. First team to reach it wins bragging rights for the next decade. What started as a training exercise would become a cautionary tale about hubris, nature, and the razor-thin line between confidence and recklessness. Day 1, the descent the SEALs hit the jungle like a hammer. Morrison's philosophy was speed and aggression. Shock and awe translated to jungle warfare. They moved fast, covering 8 kilometers before nightfall, barely pausing to assess their surroundings. "We've got this in the bag," said Petty Officer Rodriguez, swatting at mosquitoes the size of hummingbirds. 4 days tops. The SAS approached differently. Thornton had them moving deliberately, reading the jungle rather than fighting it. Sergeant Mac Allister, their survival expert, stopped frequently to identify water sources, edible plants, and potential hazards. "The jungle's not our enemy," Mac reminded them. "It's our training ground. Respect it, and it'll teach us. Fight it, and it'll kill us." By nightfall, the SAS had covered only 4 kilometers, but they'd established a proper camp with overhead cover, elevated sleeping platforms, and a water purification system using bamboo and charcoal. The SEALs, meanwhile, strung hammocks between trees and broke out their MREs, confident in their superior pace. Day 2, the first cracks Morrison woke to find Petty Officer Chen scratching frantically at his arms. Red welts covered his exposed skin. Fire ants had infiltrated his hammock during the night. Within an hour, Chen was running a fever, his lymph nodes swollen from the venom. "Can you move?" Morrison asked. "Yes, sir," Chen lied, his jaw clenched against the pain. They pushed on, but their pace had slowed. The jungle canopy seemed to press down on them, the air so humid it felt like drowning on dry land. By afternoon, they'd lost the trail twice, and Chief Petty Officer Williams had sliced his hand open on a wait-a-while vine, named it because its backward-facing thorns made you wait while you carefully extracted yourself. The SAS, meanwhile, had found a rhythm. They moved in practiced silence, using hand signals perfected over years of operations. When they encountered a swollen river, they didn't force a crossing. Instead, Mac led them 2 kilometers upstream to a natural ford, adding time but eliminating risk. That night, Lance Corporal Davies caught a jungle fowl using a simple snare. They cooked it slowly over a smokeless fire, the protein a welcome boost to their rations. "Americans are probably halfway there by now," joked Corporal Harris, the team medic. Thornton didn't smile. "Maybe. Or maybe they're learning why the jungle owns a 100% mortality rate for those who don't respect it." Day 3, the reckoning Chen couldn't continue. His fever had spiked to 104 degrees, and he was becoming delirious. Morrison faced an impossible choice: split the team to evacuate Chen, or push forward and hope he could recover. "We didn't come here to quit," said Rodriguez. "We can carry him." It was a decision born of pride rather than tactical wisdom. They fashioned a makeshift stretcher and continued. But now 5 men were doing the work of 6, and 1 was dead weight. Their water supplies were running low. They'd been drinking from streams. Without proper purification, banking on their iodine tablets to handle the bacterial load. By afternoon, Rodriguez was vomiting. Then Williams. The Cryptosporidium parasite, common in jungle water sources, had found eager hosts in bodies weakened by exertion and stress. Morrison finally called for extraction on their emergency beacon. The helicopter arrived 3 hours later, plucking Chen, Rodriguez, and Williams from a clearing. The hovering aircraft attracted every predator within 5 kilometers. and when it departed, the remaining 3 SEALs found themselves being tracked. "Did you hear that?" whispered Morrison, his rifle raised. In the undergrowth, golden eyes gleamed. Sumatran tigers, disturbed by the helicopter, were now following the scent of blood and weakness. Day 4, Adaptation versus Attrition. The SAS crossed the halfway point to the extraction zone. They'd encountered their share of challenges. Harris had pulled a 6-inch leech from his inner thigh, and Davies had nearly stepped on a Malayan pit viper. But their measured approach was paying dividends. The key, Mac explained as they purified water using a solar still they'd constructed from a plastic sheet and a collection container, is to be comfortable being uncomfortable. You don't fight the jungle, you become part of it. They'd been eating well, supplementing their rations with palm hearts, bamboo shoots, and protein from insects. Mac had even identified edible fungi growing on rotting logs. Their bodies were adapting rather than breaking down. The remaining SEALs weren't so fortunate. Morrison, Petty Officer Davis, and Seaman Thompson were down to their last rations. They'd been pushing hard to make up time. But the jungle had other plans. Thompson had developed a foot infection from constantly wet boots. Immersion foot was progressing to full-blown trench foot, the flesh turning white and sloughing off. When they finally stopped for the night, exhausted and demoralized, Morrison realized they'd been walking in a circle. The GPS unit had malfunctioned in the humidity, and without proper navigation skills, they'd wasted an entire day. "Sir, we need to call for extraction," Davis said quietly. Morrison's pride wouldn't allow it. "We're 3 days from the objective. We can make it." But the jungle was listening, and the jungle always takes its due. Day 5, the price of pride. Thompson couldn't walk. His feet were ruined, and infection was spreading. Morrison and Davis fashioned a litter, but they were running on fumes, dehydrated, undernourished, and mentally shattered. At noon, they stumbled into a clearing and activated their emergency beacon again. The helicopter pilot took one look at Thompson's feet and whistled low. "You boys need a hospital, not an extraction point." Morrison watched his team being loaded into the aircraft, the weight of failure crushing his chest. Tell them we made it to day 5. "Tell them yourself," the pilot said, not unkindly. "This isn't a competition anymore. This is a rescue." As the helicopter disappeared into the canopy, Morrison sat alone in the clearing, his rifle across his knees, tears mixing with sweat and rainwater. The jungle's insects began their evening symphony, indifferent to human suffering. Day 6, the long walk. The SAS moved with quiet confidence. They were tired, certainly, but they were functioning. Thornton had kept morale high by maintaining routine, brew-ups for tea at specific times, regular medical checks, evening discussions about tactics and lessons learned. "The SEALs are probably at the extraction point already," Harris said, though his tone suggested he didn't believe it. Mac shook his head. "I've been reading the signs. We passed their tracks yesterday, going in circles. The jungle chews up the unprepared and spits out the stubborn. Speed without wisdom is just a faster way to fail." They encountered their own crisis that afternoon when Davies slipped on a muddy slope and slid 20 feet down an embankment, dislocating his shoulder. Harris, the medic, reduced it on the spot, a procedure that left Davies pale and shaking. But they adapted, redistributing his gear and adjusting their pace. "Can you continue?" Thornton asked. Davies nodded, sweat pouring down his face. "It's not about comfort, sir. It's about completion." They pressed on, the extraction point now just 8 kilometers away. Day 7, arrival. The SAS emerged from the jungle at dawn, 4 soldiers moving like ghosts through the morning mist. The extraction point, a former logging camp, sat quiet and empty except for Colonel Richards and a medical team. Richards checked his watch, 17 hours ahead of schedule. "Well done, gentlemen." Thornton accepted the congratulations with characteristic British understatement. "The jungle was the real instructor, sir. We just passed its course." "And the SEALs?" Richards asked, though his expression suggested he already knew. "All extracted. Medical evacuation. They'll recover, but—" Thornton paused. "They were good operators. Excellent, even. They just approached this with the wrong mindset. Mac, cleaning mud from his rifle, added, "In the desert, speed and firepower win. In the jungle, patience and adaptation win." They never made that mental shift. The debriefing 3 weeks later, in a conference room at Naval Special Warfare Command, Morrison sat across from Thornton. The wounds had healed, though Thompson would never operate again. His feet required partial amputation. "Your team survived," Morrison said quietly. "Mine didn't even make it halfway." Thornton leaned forward. "This wasn't about survival, skills, or tactical superiority. Your operators are as good as mine in a firefight. This was about understanding the operational environment. The jungle doesn't care about your budget, your technology, or your reputation. It only cares whether you respect its rules." Morrison nodded slowly. "We trained for the jungle. You trained with the jungle." "Exactly," Thornton said. "We've been running jungle operations since Malaya in the 1950s. It's in our institutional DNA. You lot are brilliant at desert and maritime ops. But the jungle," he paused, "the jungle is our home turf." "What's the lesson?" Morrison asked. "For my after-action report." Thornton considered, "Speed is useless without sustainability. Technology fails in humidity and heat. Individual toughness means nothing if the team system breaks down. And pride," he met Morrison's eyes, "pride will kill you faster than any snake or tiger." "The press is calling it a competition," Morrison said bitterly. "British SAS beats Navy SEALs." "Then the press is missing the point," Thornton replied. "This wasn't about us versus you. This was about humans versus nature. Nature won. We just lost less badly." Epilogue. The lessons, the exercise results were classified, but the lessons filtered through the special operations community. Joint training intensified. The SEALs sent their instructors to Brunei to learn from SAS jungle experts. The SAS, in turn, attended advanced desert warfare courses in California. Morrison eventually commanded his own SEAL team again, but his approach had fundamentally changed. He implemented mandatory jungle survival courses, brought in indigenous trackers as consultants, and drilled his operators on the difference between speed and efficiency. Thompson, despite his injuries, became an instructor, teaching new operators about the price of pride and the importance of knowing when to slow down. The jungle that had nearly killed them became their greatest teacher. Years later, a young SEAL candidate asked Morrison about the infamous exercise. "Sir, is it true that only one team survived?" Morrison smiled grimly. "Both teams survived, son, but only one team completed the mission, and the difference between those two outcomes? That's what I'm here to teach you." He pulled out a water-stained photograph, the SAS team at the extraction point, exhausted but intact. These men didn't win because they were better shooters or faster runners. They won because they understood that in the jungle, the mission isn't to beat your opponent. It's to not let the environment beat you. The jungle doesn't care about flags or unit patches. It only asks one question: are you willing to play by my rules? The British said yes. We said we'd make our own rules. Morrison's expression hardened, and the jungle showed us exactly what it thinks of human arrogance. The lesson, bought with pain and pride, would echo through special operations training for generations. Elite skills mean nothing without elite judgment. And sometimes, the greatest victory is recognizing the difference between a challenge worth taking and a disaster waiting to happen. In the end, the jungle always wins. The only choice is whether you're wise enough to survive the lesson.